you ever understood something in your head, but then you stumbled when you actually tried to do it? You understood the concept. You read the book, you watched the tutorial, you attended the workshop, you took the notes. Maybe you even explained it to someone else, but then came the moment of action, the speech, the conversation, the sales call, the sermon, the writing deadline, the coaching session, the leadership decision, the new habit, the first attempt. And suddenly, what made perfect sense in your mind felt awkward in your body. That's because there's a difference between head memory and muscle memory. There's a difference between understanding an idea and embodying an idea. And that's what I want to talk about today. Do it poorly, rehearse it mentally, correct it wisely. Those three practices can turn awkward beginnings into embodied skill. Welcome to Leaning Leadership Ladder. I'm Tom Sims. Here we talk about leadership, growth, communication, service, and the slow climb of becoming more useful, more courageous, more thoughtful, and more effective. The leader matters because growth is rarely one dramatic leap. Most growth is a daily climb, a rung at a time, a correction at a time, a lesson at a time, a mistake at a time, a better attempt at a time. And today's lesson begins with a quote from, or at least often attributed to, Zig Ziglar. Anything worth doing is worth doing poorly until you learn to do it well. Now, that sounds strange at first because many of us were raised on the opposite idea. Anything worth doing is worth doing right. And there's truth there. We should care. We should bring integrity to our work. We should not be careless with things that matter. But there's a danger in that saying. Sometimes anything worth doing is worth doing right becomes a perfectionist, yes, a perfectionist trap. Uh, it can make us believe that if we cannot do it right immediately, we should not do it at all. And that keeps people stuck. It keeps people from doing what is next. It keeps leaders silent. It keeps writers unpublished. It keeps entrepreneurs dreaming instead of testing. It keeps speakers waiting for confidence. It keeps servants waiting for permission. It keeps people with gifts from using those gifts because they're afraid that the first attempt will not be impressive. And the truth is, the first attempt probably will not be impressive. That's not failure, that's beginning. So I've divided this into some segments. And segment one, start before you're good. And it's got some practices to it. And the first practice is to start before you're good. You don't have to be excellent to begin. You don't have to begin with excellence already mastered, but you do have to begin in order to become excellent. And that's true in almost every area of life. You don't learn to write by waiting until your sentences are perfect. You don't learn to speak when everything is correct. You learn to write and speak by writing sentences, reading them, cringing a little, revising them, and writing some more. You don't learn to speak, again, I want to say that, until you're fearless. You do it by standing up with shaking knees and discovering that you can survive the first sentence. The first public speaking experience I ever had, I was behind a very big rostrum, and no one could see my legs except the master of ceremonies behind me. And he said, well, you weren't shaking at all. My knees were knocking. You don't learn leadership by reading one more leadership book. Books help, mentors help, but leadership becomes real when you're responsible for a decision. a person, a meeting, a conflict, a mission, or a moment. You don't learn to serve by imagining perfect service. You learn to serve by showing up, noticing needs, making mistakes, listening better, and showing up again. Now, this is the hard truth. Most meaningful things are learned awkwardly before they're practiced skillfully. That's not a defect in process. That is the process. By the way, did you notice that when I came on, I started fiddling with my shirt? I still don't have it right, but it's a little bit better. I was just noticing by looking in the camera that, that is really off balance. And I suspect that's for a reason, so you could know that we have to make adjustments. A child learning to walk doesn't wait until she has perfect balance. She pulls herself up, wobbles, falls, tries again, and eventually walking becomes natural. But it was not natural at first. It was effort. It was instability. It was experiment. And in some ways, every new skill takes us back to that place. We feel awkward again. We feel exposed again. We feel like beginners again. And many adults hate, hate feeling like beginners. We prefer competence. We prefer expertise. We prefer being the one who knows. But growth often requires us to become beginners again. And that's why Ziglar's quote matters. Anything worth doing is worth doing poorly until you learn to do it well. Not because poor work is the goal. Poor work is not the destination, but poor work may be the doorway. A poor first draft is the doorway to a second draft. A poor first speech is a doorway to a second, stronger speech. A poor first plan, like see, a four poor. So you got to let your mistakes hang out there. I didn't do that intentionally. A poor first plan is the doorway to a clearer plan. It's it's to a clearer plan. And so you try, you step out, you begin, you start before you are good. Because a poor first attempt gives you something that waiting never gives you. It gives you feedback. And feedback is the raw material of growth. There I am with that shirt again. You see? You see? Always making adjustments. But starting is only one part of the process because we don't want to simply stumble forward without thought. We don't want to glorify incompetence. We don't want to baptize carelessness and call it courage. There's a second practice that belongs beside action, and that's mental rehearsal. So we go to segment 2, and the second practice is this: rehearse before and between attempts. Now, there's a word for this. We call it mental rehearsal. In performance and motor learning contexts, it may be called motor imagery. That's the practice of imagining an action before you physically perform it. Athletes do it, musicians do it, speakers do it, surgeons do it, pilots do it, leaders do it, writers do it. Though sometimes we call it mulling, brooding, walking around with an idea, or letting the subconscious work, but you imagine the action. You walk through the sequence. You picture the environment. You anticipate the challenge. You rehearse not only successes, but recovery. And that last part matters. A lot of mental rehearsal is too sanitized. People imagine everything going perfectly. The crowd applauds. You see? Applaud through. The meeting goes smoothly. The conversation is received warmly. The presentation lands. The client says, yes. The writing flows, but real life is not that tidy. A better mental rehearsal includes interruption. My phone has rung during this recording. It includes resistance. It is including forgetting your place. I've done that already. It includes someone asking a hard question. That hasn't happened. But it includes the technology failing. That happened once. Believe it or not, it just happened. But you get up. It includes your own anxiety rising. When you mentally rehearse, these things happen because they happen in real life. And then in your mind, you rehearse continuing. That's powerful. Not because the mind magically guarantees the outcome, but because the mind can prepare you to stay present. And there's a famous story often told about Major James Nesmith, uh, prisoner of war in Vietnam and a golfer. As the story goes, while he was in captivity, he mentally played rounds of golf in vivid detail. And when he was released and returned to the golf course, he reportedly played a remarkably superior game after years away from the game. And this, that story's been told in different ways, and I treat it carefully with you. But what happened was people said, "How did you play so well?" He said, "Because I've been practicing every day." Mental rehearsal matters. Doesn't replace practice, it enriches practice. It prepares the mind, clarifies the sequence, it lowers the shock of the first movement. It can build confidence. It can help translate intention into action. I've experienced in my own life these principles. There are times when I walk away from a project and the project keeps working inside me. I'm not typing, I'm not recording, I'm not standing in front of people. I may be walking. Used to do it when driving, resting, doing something ordinary, but my mind is still rehearsing. The connections are being formed. Sentences arrive, solutions appear. Back in my driving days, I'd have to pull over and write something down. A conversation I need to have begins to take shape. A teaching point clarifies, an opening line shows up. That's not wasted time. That's part of the work. But here's the caution. Mental rehearsal is a companion to practice. It's not a substitute for practice. You cannot imagine your way to complete competence. You cannot visualize your way into all the variables of real action. The body has to learn. The voice has to learn. The hands have to learn. The emotions have to learn. The timing has to learn. The room has to teach you. The audience has to teach you. The customer has to teach you. The congregation, the team, the client, the reader, the student, the family member, real people have to teach you. Mental rehearsal prepares you for the attempt, but the attempt gives you reality, and reality gives you feedback. Ready to go on to the third segment? Well, I am. The third practice is correct as you practice. Now, I'm living that out with you today. I told you that. I want you to see it in action. We often say practice makes perfect, but that's not quite right. Practice makes permanent. If you practice the wrong thing over and over, you're going to become more consistent at doing the wrong thing. If you speak with bad habits and never listen to feedback, those habits become your style. If you lead meetings poorly and never reflect on them, poor meetings become normal. If you write vague sentences and never revise them, vagueness becomes your voice. If you mishandle conflict and never examine your patterns, that pattern deepens. If you serve customers badly but keep repeating the process, poor service becomes your culture. Practice does not automatically make perfect. Practice makes permanent. Correct practice makes better. I learned this, by the way, by sitting in the bleachers and listening to my grandson's um, karate coach, and it stuck with me. Well, it's the key. Corrected practice, reflective practice, humble practice, practice with feedback, practice with observation, practice with adjustment, practice with a willingness to change. That's where many people resist growth. Some people are willing to start, but they're not willing to be corrected. They avoid feedback. They love rehearsing privately, but they don't want someone to tell them where they went right or wrong. They keep repeating the same action and they call it experience. Well, there's a difference between 20 years of experience and 1 year of experience repeated 20 times. The learning loop requires correction. Here's the loop. Begin, act, notice, correct, repeat. Begin, rehearse, act, notice, repeat. Repeat, begin. Don't wait till you're good. Rehearse. Prepare the mind and the imagination. Act. Enter the real situation. Notice. Pay attention to what happened. Correct. Make one adjustment. Repeat. That's the loop. And notice that correction does not mean condemnation. Correction is not shame. Correction is not self-hatred. Correction is not, I'm terrible. Correction is simply the question, what needs to change before the next attempt? That's a liberating question. Not why am I not perfect, not why did I fail, not why am I not like someone else, but what needs to change before the next attempt? And that question turns embarrassment into instruction. It turns failure into feedback. It turns awkwardness into apprenticeship. It turns practice into growth. Now, what have I learned so far? Well, I've learned practice the technology, practice moving from slide to slide and point to point. I've learned get the hair out of your eye before you put your glasses on. I've learned uh, be very comfortable with your transitions. I've learned adjust your shirt ahead of time. Now I'm going to put those on my list of learnings from just working through this presentation. But there's another segment, and that is how do we apply this to leadership? Leadership requires action. You cannot lead in theory only. You can have leadership values. You can have leadership language. You can quote leadership books. You can teach leadership principles, but leadership is tested in motion. It is tested when people disagree. It is tested when communication fails. It is tested when the plan changes. It's tested when someone is disappointed. It's tested when the team is tired. It's tested when the mission is clear, but the path is not. So leaders need all three practices. First, leaders must start before they're good. Now, it might mean calling the meeting, having the conversation, naming the problem, trying the new process, launching the pilot, writing the first version, asking for help. You may not do it perfectly, but avoidance is not leadership. Second, leaders must rehearse before and between attempts. Before a hard conversation, rehearse, not to manipulate, not to script every word, but to clarify your purpose. What's your goal? What's the tone? What truth must be spoken? What respect must be shown? What might go wrong? How will you stay calm? How will you continue if the other person reacts defensively? Third, leaders must correct as they practice. After the meeting, ask, what happened? Where did we lose clarity? Who was not heard? What did I avoid? What did I over-explain? What decisions remain unclear? What one thing should change before the next meeting? That's how leaders grow. Not through image management, not through pretending to be naturally gifted at everything, but through disciplined, humble, corrected practice. Next segment. This applies to writers, creators, speakers, and communicators. A lot of people say they want to write, they want to make videos, they want to start a podcast, they want to publish essays, they want to teach, they want to share their voice, but they're waiting for clarity, waiting for confidence, waiting for the perfect niche, waiting for the perfect title, waiting for the perfect equipment, waiting for the perfect schedule, waiting to feel legitimate. But the way to become a writer is to write. The way to become a speaker is to speak. The way to become a creator is to create. Now, I want to break with my own idea of what I was going to say and say, start a blog if you're a writer, even a bad blog, till it gets better. If you want to speak, join a Toastmaster club and make your first speech, make your icebreaker, get feedback. If you want to create something. Start before you're good, then rehearse mentally. Carry the idea around, talk it through, walk it through, pray with it. Think through opening, imagining the reader, imagining the listener, imagining the person who needs this word. Because even when you're just starting, you may say something that'll really touch someone's heart. Then act. Write the draft, record the video, publish the reflection, teach the lesson, and then correct. Don't merely ask, did people like it? There are far better questions than that. Was it clear? Was it useful? Was it honest? Where did it drag? Where did it come alive? Where did I avoid something I should have been saying? What did I say too many times? What's the next version of this idea? That's the creator's learning loop. Begin, rehearse, act, notice, correct, repeat. So you can apply these practices to personal growth. Maybe there's something delayed, a habit, a conversation, a discipline, a new skill, a health practice, a spiritual practice, a relationship repair, a professional transition, a new way of showing up. You may be waiting to feel ready, but readiness often follows movement. So you ask yourself, what's worth doing even if I do it poorly at first? May I say that again? Ask yourself, what is worth doing even if I do it poorly at first? What is the smallest honest attempt? Can I rehearse it mentally before I try? Can I picture myself beginning? Can I picture myself facing resistance? Can I picture myself continuing after an awkward moment? And after I try, can I correct one thing? Not everything, one thing. Growth becomes possible when we stop demanding instant transformation and we start practicing faithful correction, one rung at a time. Here's a teaching moment. Let me give you a practical exercise. Take one area where you want to grow. Write it down. Now answer these 6 questions. First, what am I waiting to be good at before I start to begin? Therefore, I'm willing to begin. Second, what would a poor but honest first attempt look like? Third, what can I rehearse mentally before I try? Fourth, what challenge should I include in that rehearsal? Fifth, after I act, what feedback will I look for? And sixth, what one correction will I make before the next attempt? That's simple, but a powerful framework. It protects you from perfectionism. It protects you from passivity. It protects you from careless repetition. It gives you a path. Begin before you're good. Rehearse before and between attempts. Correct as you practice. So let's return to Ziglar's line. Anything worth doing is worth doing poorly until you learn to do it well. That's not permission to stay poor at it. It's permission to begin. It's permission to enter the learning process. It's permission to be a beginner. It's permission to let the first attempt teach you. And when you combine that courage to begin with mental rehearsal and corrective practice, something important happens. Head memory becomes muscle memory. Concept becomes conduct. Intention becomes action. Awkwardness becomes skill. Effort becomes rhythm. And everything once felt foreign but begins to feel like a part of you. That's a climb. That's a ladder. That's one giant leap. A daily climb. Start before you're good. Rehearse before and begin and between attempts. Correct as you practice, then repeat. That's how we learn it well. This has been Learning and Leaning Leadership Ladder. I'm Tom Sims. Lead with character, learn for life, leave a legacy. For more reflections, tools, and coaching, visit my link tree /Tom Sims or connect with me at calendly.com /Coach Tom Sims. Keep climbing.